Ole Miss extended one last olive branch to the evil NCAA, and I have no faith that they're going to take it.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former staff member at Ole Miss. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now it's the number one sports podcast network in America. That is because of fans like you taking in content like this, and we will never not be appreciative of that. On today's show, we're breaking down Ole Miss preparing to face Alabama, and that's with Charles Bediako unavailable for the Tide. We'll discuss the broader implications of that situation and why that case has the chance to become explosive if it's pushed forward, and how it could kind of mirror the ripple effects once created by Curt Flood going after the reserve clause in Major League Baseball. We'll talk about that. Next, we'll examine what Ole Miss looks like regardless of how the Trinidad Chambliss injunction ultimately plays out. Should be favorable for Trinidad, but what does it look like if it's not? But first, we're going to start with Ole Miss extending one final olive branch to the NCAA before the situation moves fully into the courtroom. And why? As more facts have come to life, this case continues to lean increasingly in Trinidad Chambliss's favor. All of this and more on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that's your team every day. Today's episode is sponsored by FanDuel. The winter games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with a bet on FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. All right, so for people that are just tuning into the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, is the little recap real quick of what's going on in the Trinidad Chambliss situation. First of all, props to everybody in the Twitter sphere and the sycophants of the evil NCAA that has tried to put Trinidad's case in there with Charles Bediako and tried to put it with Diego Pavia, when in reality it's a simple sixth-year medical redshirt that is all that is being applied for. That's it. Just a sixth-year medical redshirt is what Trinidad Chambliss wants. He doesn't want what Diego Pavia had. He's not trying to say that Division II doesn't count. He's not trying to do anything but credit for 1 year where he had tonsillitis to the point where he could not function. That's it. That's all that he wants. And the NCAA has done a masterful job of trying to paint Trinidad with that brush to make him some sort of an evil actor wanting to take opportunities away from high school kids. You've heard all of that stuff. And when the waiver was first declined, it was the day after the Fiesta Bowl. They declined that waiver. They said it was performance-based. Ferris State was not helping at all. They didn't provide anything. All of that stuff instantly came out, and immediately Trinidad Chambliss, they went into lawsuit mode at that point and started preparing for it. Tom Mars was brought on, William Liston. All of this, they are extremely prepared for what's going on. Tom Mars put out the fact that the doctor didn't have any input whatsoever in the medical condition filed for the appeal. And of course, Ferris State put out quotes, and they misrepresented quotes to fit their own narrative. It was a very, very bad look by the NCAA. Ole Miss applied for a waiver after they looked absolutely horrible, and we thought that they were going to try and make it right, and they were going to do the right thing. They didn't. They doubled down. They were like, okay, we got the medical records, but we still don't believe that he was injured, even though they did not, again, talk to doctors, even though it's in their bylaws to do so. And at that point, you're like, okay, the injunction is the only way that Trinidad Chambliss has a chance to play for 2026. Now, he's heavily favored to do so. And it made you start to think of conspiracy theories of why that would go on, why the NCAA was doing this, why the NCAA was essentially stubbing their own toe over and over again to try and make a point? Was it to get congressional attention? I don't know. We all talked about the SAVE Act and what's happening and all of that. Then about 96, I don't know, 120 hours ago, somewhere around there, all of a sudden it came out that there was a recording of an announcer from the 2024 national championship game that just matter-of-factly talked about a medical redshirt in 2022 for Trinidad Chambliss before he transferred to Ole Miss. And it was obvious that Ferris State was thinking that he was going to get a medical redshirt, which completely goes against what the NCAA put out. Then all of a sudden you saw other interviews talking about it, and it just kind of piled up upon itself. And you were like, okay, these guys have a gotcha moment in court. One of those things that you see on movies, on Law and Order, that stuff. They've got their gotcha moment. If you play the facts of what's going on and you take the fact that Trinidad Chambliss has $6 million or so on the table and all of that, it is going to be fairly easy to prove damages. So when this happened, there was a reconsideration put out for Ole Miss, which is a part of the NCAA bylaws. Is like when an appeal gets denied, you can put in for reconsideration, which kind of sounds like the old "a few good men I strenuously object," and it kind of sounds like that. But they put it in there, and it made me wonder why Ole Miss would do that, because the lawsuit's tomorrow. You're likely going to get the preliminary injunction in 24 to 48 hours. Why would you put this in? And with the denial of the appeal that was done, they'd have to basically start a new case. With the reconsideration, basically you have that open-ended. And there are no doubts. They meet on Wednesdays and Fridays, and they have electronic meetings. There's no guarantee that something is going to happen today, though it could. But there's no guarantee that it's going to happen. There's no guarantee that it's going to happen on Friday, but it could. What I think could be possibly happening is the NCAA is a completely evil organization. I've made no bones about that over the last week. They seem to function in their own interest, and they look at problems about that far away from their nose, not what's going down the road. And because of that, you play the game of the big brands. We're going to go easy on them because they have the money to fight back. But the middle brands, this is our chance to make a statement. And they've done it over and over again with Ole Miss, and it looked like they were trying to do it again this time, except Ole Miss fought back. So once the temporary injunction gets sent out, essentially, at the end of Thursday or the beginning of Friday or whenever it comes out, it'll be there. If that happens, this provides an off-ramp for the NCAA to approve the appeal on reconsideration to kind of make this go away on Friday or next Wednesday, whenever it is. It's a way to make whatever's happening permanently, drop all of this that you're likely going to lose anyway, and go on about your business. Start worrying about Joey Aguilar's injunction hearing, who is the next day. It's an evil organization, the NCAA, but Ole Miss is doing a smart thing by giving them an off-ramp, because what they started, they didn't anticipate the level of pushback they got. I'm almost completely convinced of that. They did not think that Ole Miss was going to fight as hard as they fought for this, because they don't know what Trinidad means to Ole Miss people, even though it's only been 1 year. What he has provided to those Ole Miss people is generational. And because of that, Ole Miss fans owe it to Trinidad to fight for him. Just like Trinidad kind of owes it to Ole Miss people to fight for Ole Miss people. and is on the field, off the field, all of that stuff. But this is in a good spot. The NCAA has acted like an incredibly bad actor over this whole process, but Ole Miss is benevolently making it to where the NCAA has an off-ramp and a way to make this easier. They've been a good actor in all of this. They've put up with a ton. As the statement from Keith Carter said, this should have been rubber stamped. This should have been this should have been the NCAA staff level of approval instead of where it is right now, because of the NCAA being an unbelievably bad acting organization. So we will see. Like I said, something could happen today. Not likely, but something could. That organization meets on Wednesdays and Fridays to hear what's going on. Nothing happens today. It's going to go to court. And then if something comes out of the courtroom, something will be there for them to go, okay, let's just approve the appeal and be done with this. We're approving ninth-year seniors all over the place. We'll figure out exactly what's going on. So let's talk about the aftermath of this case on both sides, actually, and take a look at where Ole Miss stands with Pete Golding. We'll break that down next. Hiring isn't just about finding somebody willing to take the job. It's about finding the right person with the right background who can actually help your business move forward. And you want candidates that match what you're looking for. Indeed sponsored jobs, well, that is the move. Because instead of hoping the right person stumbles across your post, Indeed helps you match with quality candidates by boosting your job listing to the people who actually fit your criteria, like skills, certifications, and location. That's what I like about Indeed. You can get specific and target exactly what you need. It saves time because you're spending less energy sorting through mismatches. And with sponsored jobs, your post gets seen by candidates who are actually a fit. And here's the stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours, they've made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all of your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners to this show will get $75 sponsored job credit to help your job get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. And the Winter Games are officially here. And if you are anything like us, you're locking in for events you only get to see on the biggest stage every 4 years. And that's why following the Winter Games on FanDuel just makes sense. From medal counts to individual events to finding your angle on the sports that you care about most, FanDuel gives you more ways to stay connected to all of the action. You know, the drama of curling matches that start slow and somehow get really intense really fast, speed skating races that are decided by mere inches, hockey games that feel different from the opening face-off, even niche events that become must-watch when you're fully locked in to the competition. FanDuel keeps the entire Olympic experience engaging from start to finish. The Winter Games are on, and there's no better way to follow them than with FanDuel. FanDuel, play your game. Hey, do us a favor. Like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs nothing, but it keeps this free. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club and get the Locked On Ole Miss podcast with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 per year. Go to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com or check out the link down in the show notes to learn more. Make sure everybody that is signed up as a member to join the Discord server and participate. And whenever we do that, I will send out an invite to my own personal server that has some of the better Ole Miss fans on there talking about Ole Miss football as well. So be sure to sign up and participate so I can get the invite to you. I'd appreciate that very much. So, all right, so let's talk about this injunction hearing that is tomorrow. Allegedly, something could happen that makes it go away, but let's talk about the two outcomes likely of that, and that is injunction approved, injunction denied. Okay, those are the two outcomes. First off, let's start with injunction approved. Ole Miss is in a position with the injunction approved where you have the top quarterback in college football, the top running back in college football, and the top kicker in college football. That is the three positions that affect winning the most. And there are really good players for Ole Miss in other spots. Basically, you're in a position to make a run. And I don't necessarily want to hear about the harder schedule because you were up by 2 scores in the fourth quarter against everybody on the schedule last year. Ole Miss is going to have a more difficult road with a game at Austin. You play the Georgia Bulldogs. You have that weird game against LSU and Oxford. You have many opportunities to stumble. I mean, homecoming will be the Missouri Tigers or something like that. You're going to have a more difficult schedule than what you had in 2025. And that's okay because this team is going to be better than it was in 2025. They're going to be more talented, especially if Trinidad comes back. I told you, best quarterback, best running back, best kicker in college football. You're going to have a wide receiver unit. I love Jonte Cook. He is somebody that I have been big on ever since he played in the Under Armour All-American game a couple of years ago. This defense is going to be much improved. After last season, Pete Golding was like, I want to play man coverage. We're going to find people so I can play man coverage. And when you look at the linebacker, athletic dudes, okay? I think that with Trinidad Chambliss, this is a national championship contender. Now, let's say that the judge votes down Trinidad Chambliss. He does not get the injunction. You still have the best running back in college football and the best kicker in college football. So instead of 3 positions that really influence winning, you're down to 2 positions that really influence winning. And you have the talent all over the field. So the difference is I don't think that Ole Miss would be a national championship contender without Trinidad Chambliss. I don't believe that. I think that this Ole Miss team without Trinidad Chambliss would be on the fringe of the college football playoff team, really similar to the 2024 and 2023 team. Maybe like the 2021 team that lost the game at Auburn. I think that is the ceiling without Trinidad Chambliss. Now, make no mistake, they're still going to be really good. You're still going to have Santarin Perkins and Will Eccles and all those dudes lining up for what's going on. The offense, in my opinion, is going to look different with Trinidad and without Trinidad. Listen, John David Baker, he has learned from the system of being able to move this around based on the talent of the offense. I don't think it's going to be throw the ball 40 times a game with Deuce Knight like it would with Trinidad Chambliss. You both have 2 athletic quarterbacks, 2 guys that can make a difference, but with Deuce Knight, they're probably going to lean a little bit more on Kejuan Lacey and Mekhi Frazier or whoever is the backup running back in that room. The team's going to be fine. You're going to win games. I think without Trinidad Chambliss, it's a 9-8 win team, somewhere in that ballpark. I think 8.5 wins would be the over-under for Ole Miss going through that situation. With Trinidad Chambliss, you have the best quarterback in college football, the best running back in college football, the best kicker in college football, with a defense that has a real chance to be 2024 elite if you can protect him on the tackle positions. And players have been brought in just for that reason. If you evaluate it correctly on the offensive line, this team is going to be a bear. With the deep threats, the go-to guys on the outside, Deuce Alexander and Daryl Gillis, I think his name, the wide receiver out of Syracuse. Those are both speed burners. They're home run hitters with Ajante Cook. When you add Caleb Cunningham to the mix, because I do think he is going to play a role on next year's team. When you look at the tight ends that they have and the tight ends that are returning, this has a chance to be an extremely locked in team for Ole Miss moving forward. So we'll see what that is like for them. And our final segment, Ole Miss takes on Alabama tonight without Charles Bediako, and the NCAA better hope this doesn't turn into a Curt Flood moment. I'll explain what I mean coming up next.
I'm Kalia Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Number 1 ranked UConn dominated Tennessee 96-66, turning a halftime tie into a historic win and avenging last season's loss by delivering the largest margin in the rivalry's history. AZ Fudd had 27 points and Sarah Strong added 26 as the Huskies remain perfect on the season, reminding everyone why they are the reigning national champions. In the Big Ten, number 2 UCLA rolled past number 8 Iowa 88-65, powered by 22 points from Angela Dukeledge and a huge advantage in the paint, staking their claim as a national threat. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
All right, so Ole Miss takes on Alabama tonight, and it's going to be without Charles Bediako, the player that played in the G League for like 3 years and came back to Alabama and was granted the ability to played in 5 games. Everybody knows that story. He honestly, in my opinion, he didn't deserve to play because as it was ruled, and whenever you were looking for the injunction is, well, you could have played in the G League and made money there just the same way you could at Alabama. Just because Alabama's more money doesn't mean the opportunity's there. So the injunction got denied. This has an opportunity to be an explosive case, okay? And it could fundamentally change college athletics forever. It has the ability to be a Curt Flood versus the reserve clause type thing, okay? And the point that I'm talking about is they're saying that he played professional sports, but the argument is that he is playing at Alabama professional sports. What is the difference between getting your paycheck signed by a billion-dollar owner in whatever league you're in and a billion-dollar institution in the University of Alabama? I get intercollegiate athletics and all that, but the fact is scholar athlete became a dead phrase the moment NIL got passed. And once money came into the equation, people are going to be willing to fight a whole lot more for it. So what the NCAA likely wants in this situation, in my opinion, is for it to go away. You didn't get approved, go back to the G League, be whatever. Just stop fighting right now. Right now, the NCAA has a win. They have a really big win, and it looks like their institutions held up in this challenge of a player that played 3 years in the G League going back to college. But the reality of it is, if this goes to a trial and you have to convince a jury of your peers that somehow getting paid from one billionaire and getting paid by another billionaire, there's a difference in that situation, it's going to be a hard thing to prove. And it's a situation where I think the court's going to kind of tilt towards Bediako and his guys. Now, like I said, everybody likes to put everything right there, and that's about as far away as they are willing to go, just inches from your nose. And that is as far as you're willing to look down the road. And there's a chance that Bediako just drops it right now and goes and does whatever he does, makes money in Europe or whatever's happening. But there's also a chance that the NCAA kind of pissed off the wrong guy. And that's the same thing that happened with Major League Baseball with Curt Flood. And Curt Flood, the Major League Baseball, they tried to get rid of the reserve clause essentially 5 times over the course of their history. It's nearly 100 years of the reserve clause being in there. And what that is, and what it started with 5 players that you could just protect, and you got to keep them, and they were reserved to come back to your roster no matter what the contract status was. That eventually became everybody being a part of the reserve clause, to where the owners essentially owned everything about your professional career. From, if you don't play for them, you don't play for anybody else. And to play Major League Baseball, they had the choice of what your team did. You had no say-so whatsoever. Curt Flood challenged that all the way to the Supreme Court in the 60s and won the case. And that led to free agency in baseball and all of that stuff with it going away. And what you see now is the Major League Baseball that you see right now, not the Major League Baseball that existed in like 1959. Curt Flood was ultimately responsible for that, because Major League Baseball kind of pissed off the wrong guy. And if Bediako is the wrong guy to where he pushes this, you could have a situation where eligibility just goes away. It isn't a situation where college athletes are playing anything. It becomes essentially a minor league sport at that point, which they've been branding it as a minor league sport for decades at this point. But that is what could happen if Bediako presses this. There's no more 5 to play 4. There's no more anything of what's going on. It could be the end of eligibility, period. Bediako has that at his fingertips, with the ability to go up and down to the minor league sports that is college sports. That is on the table. Whether you agree or not, that is officially there if Bediako wants to fight this. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And it just goes away, and the NCAA can just kind of go, whew, we made it. We got through it. But if he wants to fight it, if he is that guy, then the NCAA could be in a lot of trouble. And now we know why they pressed so hard on this case leading up to it. When in our heads, all we looked at it is like, oh, a professional athlete going back to college. Of course they'd fight that. No, once you go into the longer lasting stuff of where this could go, you could see why they were very, very in tune to what is going on. Anyway, thanks for tuning in today on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk about Trinidad Chambliss all this week. We're going to talk baseball as well, as Ole Miss takes on the Nevada Wolfpack on Friday. Make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you can get all the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels as well, so check that out. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get the Locked On Ole Miss podcast ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonolemist.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on YouTube, we are going to send you on over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On podcast YouTube channel. On audio, make sure you check out a second listen, either Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC. Hotty toddy, everybody. We will see. We're about 24 hours away from the Trinidad Chambliss hearing. We'll see how that goes. Anyway, hotty toddy, everybody.